This bike was built as an actual joke. It was announced on April Fool's Day of 2020 as a bike from the future. See, just like phone cameras go up by 2 megapixels every year, mountain bikes evolve in tiny steps. But the Grim Donut is 10 years of bike evolution instantly, and the joke was supposed to be that the bike would perform terribly. And then they actually tested it.
Lap on the Green Donut. It was wild.
It was wild.
And I did a 203.
Holy s***!
That's pro racer Johan Borelli crushing his own time aboard the Grim Donut as its creator, Mike Levy, cackles maniacally. So, did Pinkbike accidentally create the fastest mountain bike?
203!
Certainly seems that way. Today, we're spending the day on it to find out for sure. We're gonna take the Grim Donut downhill and see if it's really as fast as they say, but also, we're gonna treat it like a normal mountain bike, riding it from town to the trails and on a ride to see how it handles other things. I'm Seth from Burn Peak, and I traveled all the way to Squamish, Canada to ride a time machine. All right, it's time to see if this thing goes downhill as well as they say. A modern enduro bike is designed to descend and climb well, but it's descending that wins enduro races and sells bikes. As a result, from 2010 to 2020, head tubes got progressively slacker, half degree year after year. A 90-degree head tube angle would be straight up and down like the caster on a shopping cart. A modern cross-country bike may have a 68-degree head tube angle. My trail bike is subtly slacker at 65.5 degrees, which makes it better downhill. It makes sense. When you point the bike downwards, you can see how the fork is still angled a bit to absorb bumps. Well, Mike Levy extrapolated on that change we saw through the 2010s and pushed the head angle on the Grim Donut 10 years into the future. The steering is hilarious.
Oh my god!
All you can do is laugh when you steer it.
Oh.
It's so funny. 58 degrees. This has its drawbacks. On flats, it makes the bike feel weird, and on climbs, practically unrideable. But our first test was at a downhill park. Thanks to the twisty nature, this might be the worst downhill trail I could possibly take this bike on. Actually, well, we haven't gotten to the turns yet. Why does this not feel as bad as I thought it would? Oh, this is terrible. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, do not take this too fast into a turn. I feel like an alien from another planet who just discovered this crazy thing that humans ride called bicycles. But little do I know, this is not a normal bicycle. Oh my goodness. As the bike picks up speed and the terrain gets steeper, the donut starts to feel normal, especially if you're going semi-straight. Actually, it feels quite good. This happens to be version 2 of the Grim Donut, in which many adjustments were made by Dave Weigel and Chris Kokalis at Pivot.
Hey Chris, how's it going?
So the stupidity was at least overseen by people who know what they're doing. But version 1, not so much.
Wow, that's something pretty unique, yes.
Can you help me with this?
Yeah, we can have a try, but there's a lot going on.
The design for version 1 had a 57-degree head tube angle, 3 bottle cage mounts, and a host of other futuristic and groundbreaking features.
I can't use my high pivot virtual design?
No, I think you probably have to go more basic design.
Okay, so we could put my geometry on this frame.
Yes.
But very little of that made it onto the original production frame, but it helped prove the concept. None of those water bottle cages ended up fitting, and instead of a totally custom design, it was based on a catalog frame adapted to Levy's geometry. According to those who wrote it, version 1 of the Grim Donut was terrifying to ride, if only for the fact that nobody knew whether or not the head tube would snap off. And while descending on version 2 is an interesting experience, I feel safer knowing it at least has a stamp of approval from Pivot. Wow, you kind of launch into things nose first. Oh, the second you hit a really sharp turn, and I don't know these trails very well, you are thrown for a loop. Okay, let's launch into these rocks. Yeah, sharp turns are not good.
How'd it go?
What a first trail to take this bike on. I fear for my life.
I bet.
Let's go on something straighter. The donut's geometry goes deeper than just the head tube angle. Just look at the seat tube. It's 83 degrees. In an effort to try and make slack enduro bikes climb competently, companies had been pushing steeper seat tube angles to center your gravity over the cranks. 83 degrees is properly 10 years into the future. Does it make the donut climb better? Well, it actually makes it a little bit easier to pedal, but that's about it. And with the wheelbase on this thing, or the distance from the center of one wheel to the other, you just feel like you're sitting out in the middle of acres and acres of bike. For reference, my size small Pivot Trail Cat has a wheelbase of 1,176 millimeters. The Grim Donut, also considered a size small, is just over 1,400 millimeters. It's actually quite stable, and in fact, it feels semi-normal when you're charging through rough terrain. Keep dropping into steep stuff that's kind of scary, and this thing just does remain in control, I gotta say. Oh yeah, just eats that stuff. But as a result of this preposterous wheelbase, tight turns feel like steering a dually. Practically like a flow trail, but oh. Yeah, you hit some kind of a turn. Wow. The turns scare me. They really scare me. Maybe I'm a scaredy cat or something, but this thing's weird. Oh, turns like that are murderous. The back wheel feels like it's being dragged through the turn from the inside. You just feel the back wheel like kind of lagging. Like, you know when they say a bike likes to pull through the turn and the back wheel follows? This does the opposite. Like your back wheel is still going in a different direction when you're trying to turn. And you feel the wheel dragging against the trail surface. Monster trucks have four-wheel steering.
Yeah.
This needs like two-wheel steering. Like it needs steering linkage on the back so that the back wheel turns. I promised myself not to go over big jumps on this bike since I'm trying to dial back the risk this year. All right, I promised I wouldn't hit any real jumps on this. So I'm gonna hit some baby jumps and just feel it out. Does this thing jump amazing or something? Oh man. Despite the donut's surprising competence on jumps, I wouldn't want to land flat on this bike. Just look at how the fork would absorb such a landing at this slack angle. The stanchions would be likely to bind up at least a little bit, and indeed, Pinkbike's Huck to Flat test doesn't give me any confidence on flat landings. Aside from that, the Grim Donut is a solid, maybe incredible performer downhill, so long as you mind your pedals. As a result of the wheelbase and a variety of other factors, the Grim Donut is prone to pedal strikes. This is an absolutely terrifying possibility I was anxiously aware of while descending. To counteract that, it was fitted with 155mm cranks, which I quite like. Yeah, it was kind of a dumb line I took. Anyone who's caught a pedal on a descent knows how terrifying it can be. Off-roaders would understand the trade-off between wheelbase and breakover. Long vehicles are stable, but they also have the tendency to smash their chassis on rocks. Mike Levy made no such trade-offs on the Grim Donut. Even like quick little maneuvers like twitching your bars between trees becomes kind of dicey. Despite the trade-offs of its super futuristic geometry, the Grim Donut was fast when descending. Sure, there's always the possibility of a high-speed pedal strike, and no matter how remote the chances, there's always that creeping anxiety that the head tube might snap off. I'm also no racer. This bike felt to me about as ridiculous as it looks, but the numbers don't lie. Johan proved the Grim Donut is blisteringly fast. He even said this.
Chile, for example, EWS in Chile, yeah, this bike wins by a minute.
So if Pivot Bikes and Dave Weigel helped improve version 2 of the Grim Donut, and they undoubtedly saw how fast it ended up being, why doesn't Pivot or some other company make a bike like this? With some clever changes that moderate the downsides, it could be pretty good. Well, the truth is that some of the downsides are basically unsalvageable. That 83-degree seat-tube angle does little to make the Grim Donut a competent climber, especially when you're navigating around a switchback. Uphill maneuvers become very difficult, and steering doesn't feel like steering. It feels like a wheel flopping from side to side. And if the possibility of pedal strikes is terrifying while descending, it can be equally annoying and debilitating while climbing. Once you get used to it, you can kind of climb stuff, it just sucks. And you start to realize why more and more bike manufacturers and people are willing to deal with sucky climbing for better descending. Maybe not to this level, but that seems to be the direction things are going in. Because you're way out in the middle of this super long bike, pedaling is exhausting as you're perfectly positioned to compress the rear suspension on every crank. The custom DW linkage can only do so much to moderate this. It's exhausting, unruly, nearly useless at low speed, and of course, hilariously easy to pedal strike. As Johan put it, the Grim Donut descends better than a downhill bike and climbs worse. But the descents. Okay, getting the hang of turns. Another thing about this bike, it is not playful. It is hard to play around on. I wouldn't call it lively, although this is probably a lot more lively than the original Grim Donut because it's got DW link. The Grim Donut is about as playful as an aircraft carrier, and I wouldn't use the word athletic to describe the riding experience. It's more like racing with Bowser or Donkey Kong, very fast with the right pilot behind the bars. Now, after testing the Grim Donut for a bit, I started actually getting a little bit used to it, and that's scary. You don't want to get used to a bike like this and then need to hop on a normal one after. But that's exactly what I'll be doing tomorrow. But speaking of normal, rational bikes, they now look a lot more like the Grim Donut than they did in 2020. Seat tube angles went from the mid-70s pre-pandemic to as much as 78 degrees now. Wheelbases are often deep into the 1300s. And the reach on the Grim Donut is bang on for a modern trail bike, maybe even a little short for an enduro bike. And with another 5 years until 2030, there's a bit more evolution to go before we can really say for sure if the Grim Donut is in fact a bike from the future. One thing's for sure, this isn't as weird as it would have been in 2020. And having spent some time with the Grim Donut, I've become aware of just how special it is. In the back, next to the valve, has an Easter egg on it.
What does it say?
It's filled with Easter eggs. Many have noticed the sprinkled donut theme on the decals, but you have to look closer to see the other details. Legendary BMXer and artist Taj Mihalik grew the logo on the head badge. His style is completely unmistakable. And Industry 9 even etched the Grim Donut logo on the opposite side of the hubs from their own logo. That's a pretty special detail, but this one I almost missed. Industry 9 etches their logo on each individual spoke, but on this one spoke, they etched something else. The right amount of stupid. Something uttered more than once during the original Grim Donut series. The other really special thing about the Grim Donut is that it actually looks awesome. Even with the silly geometry, it just looks like a killing machine. And in a narrow set of circumstances, it is, especially with the right rider aboard. When it isn't eating rock gardens, I'm sure the Grim Donut subsists on a diet of cross-country bikes and refined sugar. I hope to someday see it feed again with a more capable pilot aboard than myself. Now, the Grim Donut was indeed a joke, but it remains one of the most innovative jokes in mountain bike media history. It was one of Pinkbike's most successful and well-known stories ever. It started with a piece titled, "We Went to Taiwan to Make a Bike from the Future." That bike from the future was simply a set of angles and numbers crudely doubled from the prior decade. And it might have taken until now to fully grasp how hilarious and genius that concept actually was. The fact that it actually worked in a narrow set of circumstances, and that modern enduro bikes actually have continued in that direction, at least somewhat, is just too perfect. You can't come up with this stuff, but apparently Mike Levy and his colleagues did. And it started a discussion that's still relevant to this day. Thrilled to have ridden this legendary bike, and hopefully I've explained it in a way that your grandma can understand. Thank you, Pinkbike, for greenlighting this wonderful piece of history. I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you learned something. And if you didn't, I hope you at least found it entertaining. Thanks for riding with me today, and I'll see you next time.